Also want to give double honors to the elders and apostles that created Millstone, teaching the truth and sincerity, and also who rule well. Peace and salutation to the hopeful elect that scattered four corners of the earth, which are you so-called Negroes, Latino, Hispanics, Native American Indians. You know, the Israelites that's coming out there, the elect nation, the nation of Israel, the only nation that the Lord is dealing with, okay? This brother, Jonathan, coming out of Great Millstone in Detroit. And this lesson is, what I'm going to say is, so what if you read the Bible from front to back? All right? Because, you know, we got a lot of people out here amongst Jake, amongst Edom, these wicked pastors, preachers of the churches, Bible thumpers. You know, you're not going to, just because you read it front to back doesn't mean you're going to actually get the full understanding of the scriptures, okay? You know, what does the scripture say? You know, yes, there were different men. You know what, let's grab that. 1 Corinthians 14 and 32. The spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. So now the reason why I brought this up is because, yeah, a prophet is going to speak things before they happen, but a prophet, naturally I looked this up in the Blue Letter when I was getting into the etymology and the Strongs, it was getting into an interpreter, you know, to interpret what these prophets were seeing at the time. You know, like when a prophet would see a whole bunch, like you see the destruction of, you know, America, Babylon the Great, spiritual Babylon, spiritual Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, these prophets, man, they don't know what an ICBM is, so they would interpret it the best way that they could. You know, they saw arrows, you know, because, you know, missile is kind of sharp. It's shaped like an arrow. So you have to interpret these things. That's why also the Lord always says, seek a teacher. You know, because it's, and you know, those teachers are the prophets. The Lord said He reveals those secret things unto His servants, the prophets, roughly paraphrasing. All right. And so when you read the Bible, and you so-called think you have an understanding, that's going to cause confusion, because one thing that's changed, you don't have the Hebrew, you don't have the Greek. Certain words change over times, man. And, you know, that's what, you know, y'all was shine, man, this is a mystery. It's not just for you to read it, just to get. That's why it says seek a teacher, okay? So, let me grab going down, because I made that statement. If you just read it and you think you have an understanding, you might run across some contradictions, you know, from, like, let's put 2 and 2 together. Psalms 147, right? Actually, let's get the scriptures. Reads 19, this is Psalms 147 and 19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes unto let's slow down. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgment unto Israel. Okay? He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. So let's go into a particular certain specific group of people, which are the Israelites, okay? So you might get into something like John 3:16. So let's get that. And honestly, what I'm getting right now, these are actually milk scriptures. These are still some things that you should know, just to combat, a scoffer, So it's John 3:16, and it says, "For Yahweh so loveth the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." And a lot of Christians be like, "I believe." What does that scripture say? Anybody that believes on the name. Now, like I said, in a time period of history and its progression, language has changed. Not everything means the same. You go into like the 18th century or whatever, you call somebody a forgot. I'm gonna use code words. You know what I'm saying? Forgot. It's basically a bundle of twigs. But if you say that, hey, what's going on? Forgot to a Jake, man, especially at 2:30, he might blow your cat back. All right. So you have to get into your words. So let's read that one more time. This is John 3:16. And it reads, "For Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." So sometimes when you get into your scriptures, you gotta look up certain words. So the word in this verse you gotta look up is the word world. Now when you get into the Greek, it gets into the word cosmos. Alright? Now sometimes the blue letter changed, because I remember when I first looked into it, I was getting into particulars, basically to sum it up and to simplify it, a particular group of people, all right, and that's the Israelites. This is a mystery, man. But as you can see, when you break it down that way, you get a better understanding. But if you read it, just straight black and white, without having the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that causes confusion, right? And what is Corinthians 14? Actually, let's go back to that. Go back to it. So let's get down to another verse. It says, verse 33. This is 1 Corinthians 14 and 33. It says, "For Yahweh is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches and in saints." But the point is, though, the Lord ain't gonna try to confuse you. He ain't gonna trip you up. If he's dealing with you, he's gonna make you get it. But this is not for everybody. And if you get confused, that just simply shows the Lord is not dealing with you. Okay? That's why it says, seek a teacher. Because what does the scripture say? Let's get Revelations 1 and 3. So that just goes to show you just can't read. So we're getting in our word today. So it's Revelations 1 and 3. It reads, "Blessed is he that readeth, and he that heareth the words of this prophecy." Slack it. And keep those things which are written therein, for times is at hand. All right, so getting into studying and taking in this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the scriptures. But going up, let me start it again. It says, "Blessed is he that readeth." Now, when you break down that word "readeth," it means knoweth accurately. So whatever you're reading, you got to know accurately what these prophets were interpreting. Okay, this is just not going to be, straight up black and white. You know, that's why, you know, you got to get into that milk to build that foundation, man. And like I said, you do need teachers. So I was going to get Hebrews 5. I think it's 12th verse. And also, when you get into it more, you see the order. Yep. And it says, all right, this is Hebrews 5 and 12. It says, for the time ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teacheth you, which be the first principle of the oracles of Yahweh, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. Because when you get into the scriptures, you know, desire the sincere milk, you gotta have the milk. You gotta have the milk scriptures. You gotta have the basics. You know, you're coming back into when you get to true wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and wanting to accept it, you're coming back as a baby. Now, like I said, a baby, it's not that hard. When you see a baby, they just can't, you know, chew on a steak. They're gonna choke. They need something that they can absorb, consume. So you gotta have that milk. All right, and it says, as you were, for when thy time ought to be teachers, you needed to be teach. And who was our teachers? You know, well, on this side now, we got our elders and apostles. You know, from Great Millstone all the way starting from High Priest Abba Bibbins. Now we got Elder Apostle Tahar, Elder Apostle Gabar, Elder Apostle Ramla, Elder Apostle Rakah, on down. You know, they are teachers. You know, but they were taught too. All right, that's when we get into the stories of like One West. Salakia. Let me get Sirach 8 and 8. And I just use the scripture as like, you know, don't like be, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I don't want to do this. Hey, but the ones that we're getting the tutelage from, they had to do the same thing. All right. So let me grab this one. This is Sirach 8 and 8. It says, despise not the discourse of the wise, but acquaint thyself with their proverbs. For of them thou shalt learn instructions in how to serve great men with ease. Okay? Here's the point. Listen not the discourse of the elders, for they also learn from their fathers. Of them thou shalt learn understanding, and to give answer as need required it. So whatever our elders and apostles went through, I mean, whatever we going through, you don't think the elders and apostles, they had to, you know, be under subjection. They had to sit. They had to learn. Shoot, some of them got cussed out. You know, I was watching the video of Elder Apostle Kraut, and he was telling them like, "Yo, Elder Apostle Hart was getting on us. You know, didn't feel good, but it felt good. He saw the potential in us. You know, that's why, you know, the head of our camp, our elder, he always say, hey, you gotta go through the furnace to earn this. You know? So that's why you really gotta get into the real, you gotta find that sincere teacher, that real, because the Lord gonna bring the prophets back. The word is not gonna shoot out void. It's gonna come to pass. And now you see, you can see it because Israel is waking back up. Okay? So what if you read the book from, you know, Genesis all the way through the Apocrypha, all the way to the end of Revelation? But do you really understand it though? So I'm gonna end it off this one. This is one of my favorite scriptures because, you know, it's just not black and white. This is Psalm 78. And I believe the point is in verse 2. Let's grab it. see to the point, and it says, I will open my mouth in a parable, and I will utter dark sayings of old. All right? You know, like when I get into that word, let me see, utter dark sayings, it was basically getting into riddles, parables, you know, things, mysteries. So you have to like have a prophet sincerely break it down and teach you what those words mean. You know, there's tons of parables, especially in the book of Matthew. You got, you know, one of my favorite ones is Matthew, I believe 13, when it talks about the wheats and the tares. Let me grab that real quick. Let me just make sure, you know, that's a good one. Because when you get into the wheats and the tares, that actually goes to show, see, us men in GMS, it's not a black and white thing. And I'm talking about the outward, the appearance of your skin. We're talking about the spirit. Okay. Yep. Matthew the 13th chapter talks about the wheats and the tares. But that'll be another video, Lord willing, for another, you know, time. But Lord willing, I hope this video was edifying. And again, I want to give all honor, glory, and praises due to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem, Rakam. And again, double honors to the elders and apostles, their great millstones, teaching the truth and sincerity, and also rule well. Peace and salutations to the whole full elect. We're going to close out. Say Shalom. And on to the next lesson.